Good morning, brothers and sisters. This is Brother Jernigan. And I've got questions, guys. Well, no, I don't have any questions. I had questions. Unanswerable questions. And so I was disfellowshipped by the Christian Church of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And so we want to discuss these questions. That's the reason for this channel. Jwtestmny. This is my testimony. So we'll talk about doctrine, and if you are a practicing Jehovah's Witness, this will probably mean 10 minutes of pain. I'm going to try to keep it 10 minutes. So today we're talking about the faithful and discreet slave. Because this is one of the main tenets of the teaching of the Christian Church of Jehovah's Witnesses. The Church of the Jehovah's Witnesses. The faithful and discreet slave. Who doesn't know about that? You know, who doesn't remember that? So I had questions about that, an unanswerable question, and this is what it was. I was like, well, because at the time I was like, well, I understand in that illustration when you read what Jesus says about the faithful servant, and then the servant that sinned not knowingly, and then the evil slave. So there's three groups. There's like three groups. So if you're not the faithful slave, then the only other slave you could be was the slave that got duped, the one that didn't know that it was sinning, and therefore received a few strokes. And then the wicked servant, the one that drinks and beats his fellow servants, gets beaten to death, or you know, the scripture says he will receive severe blows. But I did research because I loved, you know, God and the Bible, so I was just bored, you know, with the circlings and the subject matter of their canned meetings and, you know, their program. So I would continue studying, and I found certain translations where Jesus said he would cut in half that wicked slave. It says he will come at a time that slave does not expect, and will cut him in half and deal him a portion among the unbelievers. I mean, or the wicked, or whatever. But it's a severe blow, okay? And the way that the J-dubs would change the Bible, that's a whole nother video. But let's get back to faithful and discreet slave. So I'm like, well, what's going to happen to everybody else? I don't even want to talk about the semantics of the faithful and discreet slave. I don't even get into the words they use, okay? But the faithful slave, right? This is the one that the master finds doing so when he returns. So really, you wouldn't know who that slave is until the master returns. Has the master returned? But they already have like a little label on their foreheads and their chest that says faithful and discreet. It says faithful on their chest and discreet on their forehead. And they've rewarded themselves this position, and then all of the dupes, all the drones, all the wandering flock, they just go along with it. They don't ask any questions. When I started asking questions like this, it was very irritating to the leadership. It was forbidden to ask questions. But didn't Abraham question even God 10 times? He said, will God destroy the righteous with the wicked? What if there were 50 righteous men? What if there were 40 righteous men? What if there were 30 righteous men? What if there were 20 righteous men? What if there were 10 righteous men? But I can't ask a question because, I didn't understand at the time. I didn't, see where they were going with that. Okay? So the faithful and discreet servant, the one who the master finds feeding his, I guess they were called the domestics, right? He gets appointed over all the belongings, right? But they say that they're already appointed over all the belongings. But no, I mean, like, it said you would get appointed over all the belongings after the Lord returns. So, I mean, then there's that. But then they believe that the faithful and discreet slave was only the 144,000, the chosen ones of the governing body. So, like, if there's only three groups, and this is the funny thing, right? If there's only three groups, I'm like, what happens to everybody else? Now, my wife is still a practicing Jehovah's Witness, and I speak with her, and I'm like, well, which one of the three groups are you? Are you the faithful and discreet slave? Are you the slave that sinned unknowingly, and so you received a few strokes? Or are you the wicked slave? And right away, she's like, I'm not the wicked slave. And, well, she says, well, I'm not the slave that got duped. I'm not the second one either. Well, I'm like, okay, well, are you the faithful and discreet slave? So she's like, no, but I'm friends with them. That's not in the scripture. There's no place in the scripture for friends of the faithful and discreet slave. There's only three groups. The way that I read the Bible, and I'm trying to read the Bible in a way, see, I'm coming to it from a point where I want to understand God. I want to understand the scriptures. Not necessarily do I want to understand this church with their antiquated doctrine, with their mind games that they play, with their drones and their lost sheep. Okay? I wanted to really understand, so it just didn't ring a bell, like I didn't get the answer that I wanted, I'm like, man, I'm not satisfied with that. Well, they're like, oh, you're just a troublemaker. And you just want to stir up trouble, so, you're starting to look more like a goat. I'm like, man, can you not answer my question? And you're just mad because you don't understand, or you can't answer my question? So let's think about this, right? Okay. The faithful and discreet servant, the faithful and discreet slave, the one that, in Daniel it says that those having insight and those knowing their God will shine like the brightness of the expanse. It says that they will impart wisdom and knowledge to the many. Okay. And then, of course, Jehovah's Witnesses crown themselves with that, saying, oh, well, that ties in with the faithful and discreet slave. I'm like, well, it says that they impart wisdom and knowledge to the many. And I just don't feel that that's what the governing body is doing. I mean, look at their flock, okay? If they don't, their flock, when you have wisdom and knowledge, it's not like you have to go back and check your notes. If somebody comes and off the cuff asks you a question about your beliefs, like that's what I would do, toward the end of my tenure with the Church of Jehovah. Okay, I would put them on the spot, and I would ask them, elders or whoever it was, I would ask them on the spot, questions like this, and they would get really, really irritated because they were like, well, let me go look that up. And they never came back, they never would come back with an answer. Okay, so the faithful and discreet slave is this same person. I believe that the same ones in Daniel who know their God, who have a little power, and impart the knowledge to the many, and they will shine like the brightness of the expanse. During the time of the 666 and the Antichrist, and that's gonna be a big one. 666 is gonna be a big one. The two witnesses are gonna be a big one soon. Okay, but the dupe, right, the one who sinned without knowing it, receives a few strokes. So I'm like, the Christians, the Orthodox Christianity believes in a rapture, and they believe in getting left behind. But my study of that says that those that get left behind they're not forsaken by God, because they will still have another chance. So I'm like, well, there's your few strokes. Okay, and then at the end of the 7 years, Jesus returns. Okay, because the tribulation period lasts 7 years. Jesus returns, and he comes in power and great glory, and that's when there's Armageddon. The slave that was unrighteous will actually fight against the Lord. That's why the Lord beats him to death. The Lord doesn't beat him to death because of all of his evil. The Lord beats him to death because that unrighteous servant actually fights against God. The fear of Jehovah is the beginning of wisdom. It is the height of stupidity to fight against God, right? Those that fight against God, do they fear him? Certainly not. They fight against him, and so he has to beat them to death. Okay? So, that's what I found, in my study. I would be really, really interested to know how you feel about the whole faithful and discreet doctrine, how you understand. I think it's Matthew 25, some late verse. But anyway, that's my 10 minutes. So I'm Brother Jernigan, and I had unanswerable questions, so I was disfellowshipped by the Church of Jehovah.